The legend of the volcanoes. In a distant time, a very remote era before our tribes left Aztlan by order of Huitzilopochtli, there once was a young warrior. They went to a distant kingdom. So distant that they wondered how important those lands were to the empire. But they left in the company of some traders. They were very different lands, and the tribes that lived there were so different from us. They camped in the prairie. In huts made of animal skins, they moved constantly from camp to camp. Their mission was to protect the traders, who wanted to expand the territory for trade. Fortunately or unfortunately, they arrived at a time of war. The local tribes were fighting against strange men. Nothing like what we had seen. Both we and the local tribes had no idea where those Barbados men came from. The local tribes invaded the Barbados men's camp, wanting to drive them off their lands. It was a long battle. But the strange men were outnumbered. And they lost the battle. The mission to expand the territory for trade was not successful, since the local tribes were at war, and their customs were not conducive to trade. They obtained what they needed from the land and moved on to a different place, always in cycles. At least it was a life experience. And they were able to leave that place alive. But the mission was not entirely fruitless. The young warrior searched the Barbados men's camp and discovered a wounded young woman. She had fainted. She had an arrow stuck in her shoulder. Perhaps everyone thought she would die and abandoned her at the camp. Fortunately, medicinal herbs were part of what they brought for trade. And one of the traders knew how to use herbs. The young woman managed to heal. But his luck was not the best. The merchants decided to take the captive as a gift for the emperor. So, they returned with a young woman as a prize. Upon arriving at his kingdom, warriors and merchants presented the young woman to the emperor. He was delighted, for he had never seen a woman like her. Her features were unlike those of the others in these lands. She had skin as white as the snow of the mountains. His enthusiasm for the gift was so great that he overlooked the possibility of the mission failing. For it was understood that there was no possibility of bartering with those brave tribes. But as I said, the young woman's luck was not the best. The king would have liked to keep her with him, but the priests decided that she should be offered to the sun god, offering her heart so that it would not cease to shine. That's right, the young woman was destined to lose her life. The young warrior knew this shouldn't have been the case. He found her, so her life should have been in his hands, not the priest's. He wanted her to live. But from that moment on, he could never get any closer to the young woman. She was always accompanied by other virgins and a retinue of priests. From that moment on, by decree of the emperor and at the request of the priests, no one was to look at the young woman's face. Every time they saw her on the street, they were to lower their gaze until she passed by. The young warrior sensed that she was looking at him, that there was something special about being near her, but he couldn't get close, much less speak to her. Finally, the day arrived. She would be sacrificed. There was a procession. Several virgins and the priests accompanied her on the pilgrimage. The young warrior went to witness this event. And when she passed by, he looked up and saw her face. She was looking at him and continued walking. This tragic event ended the young woman's life. She was sacrificed to the sun god so that he would continue to provide his warm rays and prevent her from dying. The young warrior was devastated. He couldn't conceive of not looking at her anymore. Now he spent his time in his chinampa. He couldn't drink or eat. It was as if the life was escaping from his body. As if he had no soul. The young woman's intact body was taken to a mountain hill, from where fresh water flowed from a spring. She was carried in a rowboat, in a procession across the water, until they reached what would be the young woman's grave. Meanwhile, the young warrior, sad in his chinampa, didn't want to witness that funeral. He was devastated. The funeral ended. Everyone returned to their homes. But the young warrior was determined to see her one last time. He jumped into the water. He had to swim, because if he used a canoe or a rowboat everyone would see him and they would know that he would go looking for the young woman's body. He swam and swam. His strength was failing. And no matter how far he went, he couldn't reach the surface. It seemed as if the gods knew he would desecrate a tomb and were against him, for the current grew stronger. He felt the waters enveloping him and pulling him down into the depths. He was truly exhausted. But Tlaloc could see the young man and took pity on him. Tlaloc made the waters shrink. It was as if the lake had become smaller. And only then could he reach the edge of the mountain where the young woman lay. He climbed the hill and reached her. There he could see her lying lifeless. She was wearing a white dress that blended with her skin. He collapsed beside her and wept as he had never wept before. He blamed himself for letting them take her life. It would have been better to face the priests even if he lost his life, because now he no longer wanted to be alive to see her unable to move, and without her being able to look at him again. Without thinking, he took her in his arms. He held her close to his body and could feel the cold. The woman's young body was frozen, lacking the warmth that young women possess. Now the cold emanating from her burned. But feeling this, he hugged her tighter. He wanted to give her back the warmth she had lost. He wanted that wound to heal once more, and once again, she would return to life. The young man felt his chest ignite, his body heat increasing as if fanned by an inner fire. A fire that came from his heart and was transmitted from him to her. Suddenly, hallucinated by his pain, he felt that she was losing her cold. Her body was acquiring warmth like the one she had before when he first found her in those distant lands. And delirious with his anxiety to maintain the warmth, he felt the young woman's body vibrate. She was trembling. It was incredible. It was as if he could be bringing her back to life. But his audacity could not continue. A mere man cannot overstep his bounds. He cannot decide the fate or lifeline of another. That is only for the gods. Only they can decide who dies and who can continue living. Mictlantecutli, the lord of the underworld, realizing this audacity, was filled with rage and, overcome with fury by the audacity of this warrior, took his bow and arrow and launched one at the warrior, mortally wounding him. The young man, still dying, did not let go of the young woman, still continuing to give her the little warmth he had. That warmth that would also abandon him in a few moments, but he wanted to give it to her. Mictlantecutli approached to snatch the young woman from the warrior's arms. The woman already belonged to him. No man could take her away. And it was time to take her to the underworld, where the dead dwell. But the other gods were watching. They hadn't missed any details of this event, and they decided to help the young warrior. They stopped Mictlantecutli, left the young woman in the warrior's arms, and decided to turn them into two monuments. It was the way to give them immortality. They turned the young woman into a mountain, covered by a white sheet and as cold as her body. The young man, on the other hand, was turned into a smoking mountain. With his heart of fire, beside the young woman, so that his heart of fire would provide the warmth the young woman had lost. And he would become her eternal companion. Young warrior, now you will watch over the young woman's eternal sleep, bringing warmth to her body with your heart of fire, forever.